Recording has started.
A pleasant good evening to everyone, to our panelists, Jason, Elizabeth, Justin, Andre, Elton, Diana, and Doris. A pleasant good evening as well to our two invited guests, Dr. Filiberto Penados and Mr. Giovanni Pinello, and our annotator and timekeeper, Justin Vera. Welcome to the first student forum for Belizean Studies class entitled Young Belizeans Join in the Story, Join in the Belizean Narrative, an effort of the Belizean Studies class as an end of the semester activity. For the convenience of everyone, the forum has two sections. The first section, which is 30 minutes, and the second session, which is also 30 minutes, both will follow the same procedure. It will entail the reading of a reflective paper. The first paper focusing on a Belizean story. Each group will present their story and support the story with historical facts. The paper will contain 3 reasons why the story made an impact on each group, or on the members of each group. And there should be a reflection on the lessons for life that the story brings for the forum participants as a young citizen of Belize. After that, I will engage the students, calling each of the panelists to comment on a question I will put forth. That should take an additional 10 minutes. So I will be calling on each of you by name to share your view based on your story and on the question being asked. After this, we are going to have Dr. Penados asking an open question to the panelists, and anybody can join in. We expect all panelists to join in if possible and if time permits. So this is an open conversation, and Mr. Giovanni will take over in the latter part of the conversation, the last 5-6 minutes. So that will end the first part, and then we move on to the second section of the forum. So again, the forum is Young Belizeans Join in the Story, the Belizean Narrative. Remember, Belize is part of our story. We share in that story, and we are moving in that story. We are moving ahead. We are chartering the course in the story. So we begin by asking the panelists to introduce themselves. And we will begin with Jason. Feel free to say whatever.
Jason Feliciana. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, Jason, and Jason partners with?
Elizabeth Manzanero.
Elizabeth Would you
Yes.
like to say
Yes.
something?
Good night, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Manzanero, like Jason had mentioned, and like we all know, we're second years here. I am currently doing a theology degree.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Andre?
Um, Good night. My name is Andre. I'm partner with Doris, and I'm a second year from JP, and I'm doing a dual English and theology degree.
We ask your partner to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Doris. Um, I'm also a second year student at John Paul II Junior College, studying liberal arts. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Doris. And our final group, the third group, start with Diana.
Good evening, good night. My name is Diana Mauricio. I'm a second year student and I'm doing majoring in English, and my partner is Elton. Yes.
Good night, everyone. Uh, my name is Elton Cab, and I'm a second year in John Paul Junior College, and majoring in English. Thank you.
Very, very good. And we all know Dr. Penados Filiberto, who's been partnering with the college for quite a bit of time. So he's not a stranger to you. And also Mr. Giovanni, who's been a guest lecturer on several occasions. So he's not a stranger neither. Very good. So we are going to begin tonight, with sharing a Belizean, a segment, I should say, of the whole Belizean narrative, a story. So let us call upon Diana and Elton to share their story.
Okay. Do we have to video screen it or?
No, you, I would prefer if you can read it.
Okay. So the story that we have chosen is the story of Tipo. So it goes as you know, we are all descendants of the Mayas, men and women who were one of the most brilliant and powerful cultures known in Central America. However, the population of Mayas declined by the post-classic period, but some groups did survive. Therefore, one of the thriving Mayas were the Yucatec Mayas at Chetumal. But they were fighting against the Spaniards because they were attempting to colonize them, but the only successful attempt lasted 1 year. Their achievement to fight against the Spanish was due to the strategic form of guerrilla against the Spaniards, as well as the help they had from a former Spanish military with the name of Gonzalo Guerrero, also known as the father of the mestizo. Many Mayas feared for their lives and did not wish to be colonized and ran towards Belize, where they formed many Maya communities, and one of the many tribes were known as the tribe of the Chan Maya. Located on the eastern branch called the Macal River, and perhaps about where the Maca Bank now stands. There were a mixture of local Chan Indians and refugees from Yucatan and Quintana Roo. Hence, all information from these Mayas came from the visits of the Franciscans and Dominican friars, which meant that these Mayas had been infiltrated by Christianity. But the problem was that every time the friars left, the Mayas would fall back to their old ways. That was with their old practices of rituals as well as paganism. The resistance that the Mayas upholded made the friars take drastic measures in destroying every idol that they found and forcing the Mayas once again into Christianity. However, the Mayas at Tipu were displeased by their actions and set out one night to raid the hut where the two friars and Lazaro were staying. They tied them up and threatened to kill them, yet they did not, but sent them back out of their village back to Bacalar. The Mayas destroyed the images that the fires had taken to them, the crucifix that they held with the utmost respect, just as the fires had done to them with their idols. The defiance that the Mayas at Tipu had done towards the King of Spain, the governor, and all the Spaniards were not taken politely, and they threatened their independence. But officially, we do not know how long the independence of the Tipu Mayas lasted from Spanish rule. However, the determination that the Mayas had to die fighting against one of the most powerful nations in the world should be an inspiration of courage to us all. Courage that we must all have, especially us young citizens who are the new generation, and we have a responsibility to carry on the heart of our land in our hands and protect it just as our ancestors did. However, not only did they stand to defend their land, but their cultural traditions. They knew how important their heritage was for them because it was their identity and as a culture and people. This awareness that culture is important is something that in today's society lacks on. However, the story of Tipu should serve as a life lesson, an awareness that if the Mayas fought for their identity as a culture, we should value our traditions even more. For these reasons, we have chosen the story of Tipu because it has impacted our lives and making us aware of the history that our land entitles and the lineage that we must carry on as Belizeans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. And that was a reflection done by Diana and Elton on the story of Tipu. Um, Before I forget, Justin as annotator and timekeeper will signal when your time is running out, right? So we said that it should be around 3 to 4 minutes. 4 minutes is fine. So you will be getting a signal 30 or so many seconds before your time is over. Okay, we proceed now with Andre and Doris and their story.
Yeah. So the story that we chose was the ancient Maya, our Belizean predecessors. The Maya play a major role in discussing the history of Belize. Their empires predate most inhabitants in the area and were established here before the discovery of the New World. Due to this, they developed many ideologies and even held their own creative narrative. Um, during our time of students dealing, during our time of studies dealing with this group, aside from knowledge, it has inspired in us cultural pride, given us a better understanding of our culture, and now even enforced the necessity of history in our education system. The ancient Maya were one of the oldest civilizations in Mesoamerica, whose remnant can still be seen today. The Mayans held many beliefs, most of them which can be found in the Popol Vuh and their creation narrative. The Popol Vuh speaks of how deities were able to make the earth out of chaos and darkness. It speaks of how animals were created as first attempt to make man, a being that can give worship, but animals were unable to speak and to worship. Next, man was made out of mud, but the man out of mud was dumb and fragile and quickly crumbled. Wood was next, but woodman became vain and forgot their creators, and thus were turned into monkeys. Next was cornman, who was successful and was given reign over the land. This then explains the importance of corn in the Mayan diet and how even today, corn still remains a staple in the traditional Mayan and mestizo dishes. After receiving dominion, cornman went about establishing many civilizations all throughout the Mesoamerica, leaving many of the temples of architectural grandeur and that we know today. They faced many challenges, from droughts to famine to conquistadors and diseases. We cannot see them the ancient Mayas in their temples today, but we can see them in many ethnic diversities in Mesoamerica. In particular, in Belize, it can be seen in the descendants of in which are the Quechua, the Mopan, the Yucatec, and the Mayan bloodline can also be seen in the Mestizo ethnic group, which make up the majority of Belizean population. In modern society, that in a modern society that tries to erase the boundaries that are set by racial appearances and ethnic roots, it is easy to forget our origins and traditions. Being exposed to our ancestral history and beliefs, even if it was only the Mayan aspect of our heritage, leads to a greater understanding and appreciation of our ancestry. As Belizean students, this was the case for us too. To be given a reinvigoration of pride by simply hearing the beliefs that these people held, and to be told that you are the product of this once great empire who outlived other great empires is simply nothing short than awe-inspiring. To be given the history of one of the first inhabitants of Belize, a simple action can unbelievably strengthen Belizeans' pride in our ancestors, be it the Creole, Garifuna, or any other ethnicities that contributes to the country's diversity, by ingraining a sense of intrigueness enough to spark a great interest that will undoubtedly only raise proud Belizeans. Pride may not seem as much or may even be taken as a negative connotation, but it helps Belizeans understand that although we are equals as people, being different isn't that bad. Although pride is in our roots, although pride in our roots may be one of the most important things that we can have, an appreciation and remembrance of tradition is arguably just as important. Enclosed in the Popol Vuh are many of the stories of folktales and Maya once held true. Countless lectures and the hours invested in them also provided answers to many of the folktales and their origins. We have been taught how our predecessors dressed, spoke, and their overall history. When this was brought to light, it is easy to see how we have changed. It is easy to see how we can forget our past. In the same manner, we have also engraved it with knowledge in the history of Belize. They say knowledge is power, but when we forget our past and lose knowledge of our roots, does that not mean that we also lose power as well? It is no secret that history and social studies have had a back seat in our education system, with some of them having the lowest credit hours possible in some institutions. In some high schools, such as Mount Carmel, they can be demoted to be an elective after the second year. The preservation of our culture is just as important as the pride in it. One may be able to change how they look. One may not be able to change how they look or deny the heritage that runs in their blood, but one can easily forget their tradition and lose their culture.
Thank you very much, Andre, for your reflective piece. And Andre and Doris worked on the ancient Maya and their story. We now move on to our third group, and that's Jason and Elizabeth.
Yes, hello. My partner and I, Jason, chose the story of Soberanes. His story is that of a man who saw a failing movement of the labor class and took charge when its leaders despaired. Even in his cluelessness, he was determined to move on from the stalemate that they were put in. He literally went against the odds. Soberanes lacked influence due to the lack of education, money, class, and influential friends. Due to his lack of education, he was not taken seriously. His speeches were incoherent and contained a colorful array of lower class English. However, despite the odds, his charisma was the driving force of his movement, the force that pulled people to join the cause. On 16th March 1934, he gave his first speech and held his first public meeting where he called the leaders of the unemployed brigade cowards. It is quite comical when one thinks how he acknowledges that he was unequipped for the position of leading them, yet he was still the most suitable person to take lead. However, he was not a fool and acknowledged that he was a temporary substitute for the man who would have the right requisites to be acknowledged by the higher ups and, unlike him, be able to make a change. He was leading a mass of people who needed the people that they wanted to go against. People who appeared not to have a say in the matter of underemployment. He was leading for the most part the elderly, the handicapped, the housewives, and from time to time men who would be inconsistent in attending the rallies because they were often somewhere searching for jobs or doing works that were not full time. Nevertheless, he was paving a path for the future leader, George Caleb Bryce. Soberanis taught us three important things. Sure, Soberanis' work may have been seen as futile, but made a great change by putting courage in the hearts of the oppressed and by instilling in them the hunger for a change. The lesson that this gives us is to persevere in the face of the odds. It has given us a desire to spread the name of John Paul II Junior College. We are soon to be graduates, and we are now tasked to be trailblazers for the next generation coming close behind us. Whatever we do reflects our school, and by being the best we can, we will give the people everywhere we go the desire to have more of JP2JC. At first, the changes may be small, but we can be like Antonio Soberanes and throughout our struggle slowly but surely make a change. He once said, I would rather be a dead hero than a living coward. We can live our life being a pushover, but Soberanes thought otherwise. He was a man who would rather risk in his life in order to make a change instead of watching the world burn. Another funny thing about Soberanes is that he was a self-appointed leader. He had no need to step up and take on the burden or the weight of leading the people. Yet he saw a problem and decided to fix it. This also teaches us about having an initiative to make a change. Why sit around and wait for the answer to come to us? Instead, we can make a journey towards obtaining it. Finally, Soberanis also taught us about perseverance. He and his party, Labor and Unemployment Association, did not have the funds or the means to carry out their mission, but that did not stop them from trying. Even with the struggle to collect $4 and the pain of having to put some from his own pocket, he managed to pull enough funds and visit the neighboring community. Sobranis could have easily given up seeing that the odds were against him, but he decided to rise up to the challenge and do something about it. We may also be faced with similar situations where the best move will be simply starting. Be it the first word of an essay, the first brick of a house, or the first person to stand up for a good cause, no matter what it be, we should be like Soberanis and persevere in the midst of the odds. Thank you. Mister, your mic
Great
is
job,
muted.
Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. David, your mic happens to be muted.
Thank you very much. I think that the siren was on, so I muted it. But we thank, yes, Jason and Elizabeth for that story on Soberanes. And we're moving now into the question and answer session. And we will start, or I will start with the story on the ancient Maya and this, how it ties in with the Popol Vuh. Let me call upon Andre and Doris. We have studied quite superficially because of time the ancient Maya, and we did a bit on maybe one of the few remaining texts of Mayan literature, which is the Popol Vuh. And in your reflection, you mentioned the creation story of a mud man, a wooden man, and corn man. And my question is to Andrea and Doris, and I would call any one of them to answer, and then whoever answers next in the group, or Andrea or Doris, can build upon what the verse says. But in reflecting about the creation story of man and what they did that demerited their destruction, um, tell me, as a young Belizean, what in your mind, in your thoughts, what are your thoughts on how the new Belizean man and woman should be? I mean, we are going through a crisis, and we're going to touch on this in the second session. But after this, how should the new Belizean man and woman be? Andrew or Doris?
Mm, mm.
Okay, you can signal, yeah. Doris, let's start with Doris.
Okay. I think, given the situation that we're in, the new Belizean man or woman should be a person of action and less of words. Um, I think when situations like these arise, we can hear everyone talking, but we rarely see anyone doing um, something to fix the problem or address the problem. So, in my opinion, the new Belizean man and woman should be people of action, of bravery, to stand up for what they believe in that is right, and not just talk about what they're seeing, but also do something good.
Thank you very much, Doris. Andre, would you like to build upon what Doris presented?
I would have to say that on top of that, the new Belizean man and woman should be more going towards peace or more peaceful. Um, as we can see today, or even back in the Maya day, most or one of the reasons why the Mayas had a downfall was when they had a run-in with the colonizers, and that along uh, with other things that led to their downfall. But unfortunately, we don't have an actual invader that is human per se. But we can see how even something like this pandemic can turn Belizeans against Belizeans. And when we fail to unite, it's when we fail to overcome the greater threat that we have come across. We even saw it when they locked down San Pedro. People from the mainland were saying that all the people from San Pedro should stay in there and none of them should be allowed. And once the cases in San Pedro were resolved, people from San Pedro were saying that how they didn't want anyone from the mainland to go to San Pedro. And conflicts like this can truly bring about a downfall in any society.
Okay, thank you very much, Andre. Eh, and building upon what Doris and Andre said on the new Belizean man and woman, the qualities that they would like to see in the citizens, the new citizens of Belize, I call upon Diana and Elton. Diana and Elton, in their story of Tipu, presented quite clearly how the Tipuans resisted Spanish conquest. And Andre and Doris also mentioned invaders, no? Diana and Elton, we clearly don't have, we are not faced with a physical invader or as the Mayas war with the Spaniards, no? As the Mayas war with the Spaniards. Eh, but do you think, my first question is, do you think we have invaders, we have colonizers today? And who are these colonizers? You know, as young Belizeans, as you are, Elton and Diana, do you think we have invaders, we have threats to us as individuals, as a nation, as a people? And what are these? So we'll start with Diana or Elton, whoever wants to.
I would say pandemic, we have from our readings is that we are still colonized mentally and how we are being taught our history. Because in my experience until I even until here in Jampal, I was able to have a full education on my Belizean history. And in high school, I was mostly taught about the Caribbean and not really on my identity, as the reading says that we our history and culture is our identity, because without it we can't have a real identity, I think. um and yes, I think that we are still even if we're not colonized as the colonized by the British, because our educational system has been changing by telling the history of Belize, not just the way and how the British foretold it, but it's how we have been Americanized and how we think that the only thing good is white and not really supporting what is Belizean. That's what I think.
Okay, Elton, would you like to add on what Diana said? El can you?
Yes, can yeah. Going back to what uh, Lena have mentioned is that our classes have been not is like more focused now later in college about the history of our culture and Belize as it is. And going back to Sister Barbara's article, it says that the colonization book and history are unrelated and foreign. And we do see this like when we're going through our primary school, reading books, and then her example is the A is for apple, and then like saying that the apple in in our days we only see it during like Christmas, so we cannot really like relate back to our childhood and our culture to say. So in that sense, it is still like being colonized, as in being influenced on the cultural and um, teachings of the exterior world.
Ready, Thomas?
Thank you very much, Elton. Thank you, Elton. Um, so certainly it is evident that the aggressor, the colonizer, is different, but there are threats to our identity, to us unbecoming who we really are. And with the story of Soberanis, we saw Soberanis' story presented by Jason and Elizabeth, whereby Soberanis fought for a cause, however uneducated he felt he was, however unprepared and unfit for the job he felt he was. But nonetheless, he fought for a cause, and as Elizabeth said, he prepared the grounds. Elizabeth and Jason, times have changed. Times have changed. And the cause is different. I mean, Soberanes fought for the labor movement. George Price fought for independence and his people, George Price and the other nationalist members. My question is, what is the cause today as young people, as young Belizeans? Do we have a cause for Belize? And if we do have that cause, in your opinion, what is the cause? la causa. So anyone can start, Jason or Elizabeth. What is that cause that
I believe that
people,
we are, uh, well, we are a democratic country. Because of that, that means that the people can actually make a change in our country. However, from a few years back, or even like a decade back, we have been seeing that the government has not been giving us like the authority that we deserve, or to some extent, the what we can give to the country. As a democratic country, we have been being ruled by them, and to some extent, we have not been given the opportunity to make a change to some extent. So I believe that this is a cause that the people can go ahead and build upon, because, like I said, we deserve to have a voice, and that's something that we have not been given, and so that's something that needs to be built upon. That's what I think.
Jason?
To narrow it down, it's more like a personal cause that at least we have come up with, and that has been born. You say by going to John Paul. I am planning to attend UB, and the thing is, not all credit hours transfer, and I, along with previous students, are trailblazers for for the next generation to come behind us. And I think it's funny how we are like soberanes. Like, sure, our efforts may seem futile at first. Maybe we're not doing much, but we are paving the path for the next generation. And I think that's helpful for everyone. Is even if it's like starting a new company, selling a new product. At first, you should be prepared to lose. You should be prepared to go through hardships. But eventually, you will excel and you will become better. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jason. Narrowing it down, as Jason said, to each person's reality. So we have reached the end of the first segment, having heard from the three groups on the stories of the ancient Maya and the Popol Vuh, the story of Tipu, and how the Tipuans resisted to Spanish dominion, and the cause of soberanism that paved the way for the nationalist movement and the creation of the workers' unions. Thank you very much to all the panelists for having shared their stories and their reflections and having engaged in the question and answer session. We move therefore onto the second part, and the second part is based on a second paper, and this paper focuses on the forum participants' experience during the COVID-19 lockdown. Although we are still in lockdown to a certain degree, we are in national emergency. Your paper, or the papers we are going to listen now, will engage us in the experience of the lockdown by these participants, lessons for life that the experience has brought for you, two strengths and weaknesses that Belize as a nation and people have shown through this crisis, and two strengths and weaknesses that have been that were manifest in the community, Benke Sokots, as we go through the crisis. And we are going to listen, therefore, to these presentations, and we are going to start with Jason and Elizabeth sharing sharing with us their experience on the lockdown and the COVID-19 um, crisis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David. So I was by myself during the beginning of quarantine, and the benefits of being independent soon dwindled after weeks of being by myself. Solidarity reveals that necessity for community. We are social beings, and being alone was slowly eating at me to the point where I went back to my parents' house to enjoy the comforts of family and community. I think that being alone is great, but not when it's perpetual. Not when it's perpetual. We all need alone time, but not forever. Being in community with my immediate family also made clear the necessity for communication. The old proverb says that communication is key for a relationship, and I am an advocate for that. There can be many issues in a relationship if disturbances, be it big or small, go unhandled or unaddressed. This is when having a level-headed like mind, like when you're level-headed and unbiased, this really comes in handy. For Elizabeth, it was an eye opener because it revealed how we are interdependent. We are a fine woven cloth that without the other, strands of threads fall apart at moment's notice of trouble. She realized that not everything is in our control, and pretending it is, it's fool's play. A country may have the best military, the wealthiest people, the best technology, or even the best thinkers. Yet without God, we are in a hamster wheel moving forward without any real progress towards the ultimate good. It is vital to acknowledge the fact that we have always we need to always be prepared for a rainy day, as Elizabeth said it. This unforeseen pandemic shows us that in the midst of normality and busy life, we forget that there will be times of hardship and that we should be financially prepared for any unexpected mishap. The father of the nation, George Kittle Price, always empowered the nation to be autonomous with the agricultural system. He did not agree with the nation being dependent on the tourism sector. See, this jewel of a country, it is indeed an exquisite destination, but it is not to be taken lightly and should not be fully dependent on the tourism industry. Belize has slowed down and paused. This pause gives us the ability to stop and take a hard look at our situation. We can reflect on what we are lacking and what we will change after seeing our weaknesses. In the blink of an eye, our economy plummeted as the tourism sector closed, and that took a toll on people. In these critical times, we should also open our eyes and push for the development of the healthcare sector. We lack in the healthcare department. As COVID-19 made its way to Belize, it was evident that the nation lacked both the adequate protective equipment and healthcare personnel. The news of having to fight the COVID-19 virus was equivalent of going to war without the proper equipment. This was a call for development in the vital sector of the country. Sectors that will significantly help in case of another national crisis. Sectors that won't need to run on luck. Fortunately for us, as Dr. Manzanero stated, the nation had a quick call to action and took phase 3 measures when Belize was still in the first phase of the pandemic. It is commendable that the nation saw bipartisan government try to move forward in the midst of the chaos for the betterment of the country. It is noteworthy that Belizean citizens were extended relief funds and pantry supplies. Yes, as a boost during the crisis. Yeah, so the Belizean citizens were extended relief funds and pantry supplies as a boost during the crisis. Personal hygiene was enforced more than ever, and citizens remarkably complied with most of the precautionary measures. It only shows the open-mindedness of the people and their cry for safer, healthier community. Um, I see quarantine as a time of enlightenment. Father Bo pointed out how in this time of seclusion, this time when we're supposed to be on our own, this time turned out to be one of unity. It is strange how the moment where we are meant to be separated, it united us. As Matthew chapter 5 says, verse 16, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Now in this dark time, charity happens to be shining. Never had the church shined as much as it is doing right now. About 600 families are being provisioned and essentially fed. To me, it seems that when we are in a safe zone in a time of prosperity, we lose sight of the light God is shining because we are overwhelmed by the pleasures of the world. But now that we are in the dark, that light keeps shining and reveals society's need, both physically and spiritually. Um, it is definitely an ironic episode that we're going through. In a time where most would think to be selfish, selflessness arises. Yeah, so even though we are doing well superficially for the most part, the present pandemic has done severe damage not only to the country but to its people. As a guest in Open Your Eyes morning show, Dr. Sherry Gibbs noted that domestic violence rates are also skyrocketing since frustration levels in families are increasing because of lack of financial support and stability. Though we're in a small country, it is admirable the way our own people handle the situation. From the time the pandemic hit the country, since the majority abided by the law and complied with regulations, we are now safe. Yeah, thank you. That was our experience for the COVID-19.
That was great, Jason.
Thank you very much, Jason
Thank you, Elizabeth.
and Elizabeth. Mr. Giovanni and Mr. and Philly, I missed you on the last segment, but what I'm going to do is so that you have 10 minutes after this, and you can elaborate on the two topics, no? Rather than having five minutes, you will get the 10 minutes to do the open discussion. We now move on to Andrea and Doris.
We saw that during the time of this lockdown, it was quite eventful for everyone, even though we were all in lockdown and people think they wouldn't have much to do. For me personally, I was affected by the travel bans set in place by the country. A short trip for my mother and brother got extended for an indefinite time in a foreign country. In this time, we most need to be together, where people are finding comfort with their family and their loved ones. It was difficult for me to not have them here. And this brings to the other aspect that we agreed on, that was like the emotional well-being that we all went through.
Doris?
Like I previously said, in relation to the travel bans, my emotional state wasn't the best, having part of my family gone and finding myself locked down there were various different roles and responsibilities that I had to take on, and it felt I would be able to pull off. But what we learned from this is that we are able to adapt to these new situations that are thrown onto us without a warning, and that we should be able to appreciate the people that we have in our lives when we have them. On a communal level, during this time of lockdown, Benque Viejo del Carmen was able to keep a level of civility. The people did a good job in not causing any public disorders, and overall did a good job of following all the regulations set in place, mostly. Another great aspect that the town had shown was the amount of charity that the community had. Community aid was very present from various members of the community. They did not sit around and wait for the government to handle the situation and come and help the people. They took it on their hands to help their neighbors. However, this could have been improved if there were a greater sense of unity in the community. There would have been greater relief efforts if there would have been organization between all the people who were handing out relief the various groups could have gotten together, and instead of people receiving twice the help, it could have been widely distributed to the rest of the community that also needed it. And a second aspect was that the government aid found a way to be politicized in the community. People were denied help due to their political affiliations, which also leads to the next point on a national level. At first, Belize seemed to have no direction on how to handle the situation. But in the end, it showed that all the decisions that were made were quickly helped control the situation. There was a good coordination in different government sectors and organizations to bring information to the people on hygiene and on the virus. However, the, the, the weaknesses that the nation showed was how politics gets in the way of helping people. The people, the government, or different political organizations that were giving these help, in particular the government, it's practically a crime for them to be withholding assistance from those people who most needed it in this time, and which was also seen in the community. A close family friend um, went out to give food to different people in the community in Benque Viejo, and people would go up to them asking which political party was sending the help, because they're saying, well, they skipped me yesterday because they say that I'm from this political party. And that's just a very sad thing to hear in our country, and how much politics wraps everything, and it prevents people getting help. And another weakness that was found in the nation was the amount of police brutality that there was handling the situation. There were various situations where we heard reports on the police beating up. It is true, probably these people were not following the regulations set in place, but I think the extent to which they dragged the situations were not correct, and that is something that the police force in Belize needs to improve on having more control on how to handle situations and not letting them get out of hand and abusing the people. And lastly, I just want to point out that the this COVID-19 had a way of uniting the whole world. We were working together towards a common enemy, and it is something that we haven't seen with other aspects, such as global warming, which is something that we are seeing, but we don't see as much unity in combating that as we did with this quick spreading illness.
Thank you very much, Doris, for those insights. And we move to the third group, and that's Diana and Elton.
So, um, so uh, in our experiences, we have discussed, Diana and I, and we have discussed that this pandemic has brought new experiences to us all in various ways. The coronavirus has changed Belize and our daily life as we know it. One most obvious changes is the lockdown, whereas new laws are set upon Belize. To begin with, a new curfew has been set in which inhabitants in Belize are not to be seen on the street from 8 to 5, which we are all not accustomed to at that time. And at first, what myself, amongst others, thought this was not as much as a big deal to follow, but to our surprise, there are several persons violating this curfew, and when questioned, they're questioned, they are unable to present valid reasons. This just to be the beginning of our problem we face as a society. And when most students became aware of this virus that was spreading, we were still attending regular classes sometime around January. However, what we did not expect for is that it would spread and affect as much as it is happening globally. And in most students' experience was when we heard of the World Health Organization, known as WHO, and Ministry of Health. New practices were being implied, such as wearing of mask, washing and sanitizing our hands regularly than we normally do, and social distancing of 6 feet. And all this was something that we are all not accustomed to and found it uh, somewhat strange. And in the process of this pandemic, started to face many problems, such as people not able to go to work, where rises the situation to provide essentials to our families. Our schools have been shut down, and here we are. Work, go to work, arises situation. Our schools have been shut down along with our other businesses for our sake, not to contract this virus, and in doing so has affected our schedule and plans to what was planned to be met at the end of the year, um, such is my case. As this being for me personally to graduate and apply for a job and start my plans to go places, and all this for me has been postponed till later date. Yeah, and it has affected our community because some are not able to cover expenses such as light, water, and rent, which are the essentials, and because they are unemployed and don't have income at the time being. Due to all that we are facing, there is still light. For one, the Ministry of Education has provided a means to reach to the students to keep up with their works, and that's how my sister is keeping up with her studies. Our masses did not stop as we can access this through smartphone devices with internet, and we can read and listen to the homilies that masses them give to us, and we continue. Our classes has changed from sitting in class to a virtually online class as we are doing now, and whereas we can continue our regular curriculum. So far, it is a life-changing moment when we first heard of the first case presented and the first death that made people take this matter more seriously. Something that I found appreciative uh, from this unfortunate pandemic is how I see our community has come together and helped one another. Our families and neighbors have united to pray to and to overcome this crisis and pray for our sake and for those in the front line. Our frontline workers risking their lives to keep us safe, the government and business providing assistance to ones most affected. And to wrap up, I guess, to witness all that is happening, there are some pros and cons. It has brought us to, in one perspective, we can do things we said we wanted to do, but we're too distracted with our daily routine. As in, perhaps you could say, renovating our homes, fixing our furniture, creating our own backyard garden, our hobbies, such as reading a book, and that's sat on our shelf, longing to be read. Learn a new instrument, painting, sewing, and the list varies. It has also bring our family bond closer, communication, and keeping up with one another lives. And what most importantly made me and others personally happy is seeing many uniting with God through prayer and faith, charity and hope. And what I believe is the most important thing uh, that is to help us get through this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elton and Diana, for sharing your experiences in the COVID-19 lockdown. I will now call upon Mr. Giovanni to engage the students in an open conversation. Mr. Giovanni, it's 10 minutes for this. And after Mr. Giovanni, Mr. Filiberto will follow. If you want to participate or to engage, please raise your hand, put the signal on so that Mr. Giovanni can note of your engagement, of your solicitude to engage. So having heard from all of you, your experiences, your reflection on the lockdown and the opportunities, strengths and weaknesses, how we could improve, let us now engage in further talking about your experiences. Mr. Giovanni?
Hi, good night, everyone. Okay, all right. Given that we have such a short time, I want to I must applaud all of you for your insight. Your presentations have been very interesting. It's good to know that there are young Belizeans who are joining the narrative and telling the story from your perspective, both in terms of the historical topics and themes, as well as the current situation as regards the COVID-19 and the state of emergency in which we are abiding. One of the things that I noticed from the three presentations is that you all focus on a particular level of resistance. Whether when you spoke about Tipu, um, your story about the Maya fighting back, and even moving into some of the changes that they had to go back and forth, um, is, is, is quite well taken. But likewise, in terms of sovereignties coming out, I think it was Andre or Doris who mentioned the term knowledge is power. How would you how would you be able to, and considering that you also spoke about the COVID-19 situation and some of the politicization, um, some of the unequal treatment that has gone on, how would you as young people, how would you tackle that situation if it was within your power that with the stroke of a pen, you'd be able to change those things, having learned the lessons of the past and applying it to the present? Hello?
Oh,
Yeah, anyone?
Mr. Giovanni, can probably you repeat the question?
Mhm.
yeah, my question is, given the scenarios that you have presented where people in Belize historically have resisted, and given the situation that you are tackling, that we are tackling in terms of COVID-19 and the various issues that go along with it, how would you, knowing what you know and understanding that knowledge is can be translated into power, if it was in your purview, if it was within your control, what would be the most, all right, let's take it to what would be two of the most uh, salient things that you would do? What would be the two quick actions that you would take to bring this story together?
Doris?
For me, I think that the two things that I would suggest would be electing better people in power. I think that that would be one of the most important things that we would have to change, trying to get people that we know that will work for us, the people, and the country, not let ourselves be blinded by colors. Because in the end, being one color or the other is not important. What is important is that we are represented and that we're being helped when we need it. And the second part with that in hand would be that when helping people, we need to help everyone. It doesn't matter what race or color or political affiliation they are. We just help the people that need help. So I think having people in power who are looking out for their people would be able to solve that. And of course, we, the people, are the ones who have that power to have people up there who can help us.
Someone else? Okay, there's another. If,
Jason here.
oh,
Wait,
mhm.
excuse me, sir. Um,
Jason?
this
Yes,
is funny what
Jason.
Dory just said. I guess I'll have to, like the Mayas, I'll add to what Dory said. Um, this is basically Antonio Soberane's story, um, misrepresentation of the people, of the people by the people in power. So yeah, if we do get people who represent the minority, I guess that would make life so much easier. Um, because I heard something from my dad and other people speaking like, oh yeah, why are the people who benefited when tourism was open, why are they getting most of the funding instead of the people who don't have? Because there were trouble with some people who clearly did not have work before, not getting. But I guess yeah, it's all about representation of the lower class, like in Antonio Sobranes' case.
Yeah, okay. I was, I don't know if there's anyone else who wanted to respond.
There was this one thing that I want to bring up is that we were the last ones, as the least, the last ones to present first case of this virus, and we are the one of the first, if not first, who have been clear free from this virus. And what we can learn from it is that we are not the most powerful country that around the world, globally, and we are not technologically advanced, but we as a people, as in relating back to the power, uh, do um, help one another in following the sanitizing and those healthy matters to prevent one from contracting this virus. And we have proven that we can, as a nation, come together and be free from this. And that what I would like to bring up is that we all can be free from this, but we all just need to come together and work with one another. Yeah.
One of the things that I have found, and as you were bringing out, I just wanted to call out a couple names, um, and within all that is ongoing, two names that stand out for me, and I think you could have also, and I hope you do search for, but you've heard about Audrey Matura. Audrey Matura is an attorney at law. And there's another attorney at law, Arthur Saldivar, who has again, his name has popped up, especially over the last few days, along with another young man, Nigel Petillo. Uh, I'm reminded of Soberanis, I'm reminded of the people in Tipu, and I'm reminded also of how the Popol Vuh and the appreciation or the non-appreciation of um, plays a role. So history, as we had said, there are lessons that history teaches us. At the same time, we are looking forward to going to a new normal. Elton, a short while ago, you mentioned Belize as the country was one of the last to report the case of COVID. And again, we've been 30-something days free, but not to put a damper on it. We don't want to sound like Cassandra, but Suriname went 44 days without a reported case. They stopped at 44. So again, these are things that we need to be aware of. But one of the things that I would suggest to you as you go along in your studies is to don't forget chapter 4 of the Constitution of Belize. All right? Uh, Chapter 4 of the Constitution, rights and responsibilities. That is critical if we're going to eliminate the type of disparities, if we're going to tackle these hardships, if we're going to be able to move on to what people are calling a new normal, uh, um, as Diana mentioned in her talk about Tipu, the Maya falling back into their old ways. We see that that is part of the result today. So bear in mind that there are other areas that you also need to be aware of as you go through in life. Yes, your opportunity to do things immediately is not there, but by the same token, it does not mean that you cannot get things done. All right, my take.
Thank you very much, Mr. Giovanni. Now we move on to Dr. Penados, who's going to invite students to engage in the last part of this forum. And I wish to thank everybody for collaborating and giving in your input. It's been a very good time, very good moment to having listened to the voice of young Belizeans. Dr. Penados.
Thank you, David. Am I unmuted? Yes.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the students' presentations. I think it's definitely can see that you took the time to prepare for the presentations, and that's always great to see. You're taking responsibility for your work. Well, I have a couple of questions. One of them, I guess, the three groups, one of the groups presented on the struggle of Tipu, and there's also the struggle of Soberanis, and the third group that spoke a little bit about the Maya more broadly and the creation story and importance of tradition and so on. I wanted to ask a question. What are the connections between the struggle of Soberanis and the struggle of the people in Tipu. What are the connections there? Are there any?
I would say that they both are fighting against suppression. They want to have more rights, or the rights that they are entitled of. That's what I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say that they were fighting suppression. You could see that in Soberani's case, the people were being exploited, and the people in power were keeping it at that, keeping Belize underdeveloped for their sake, because they were doing forestry and taking out of logwood. And that is interesting because in the same case with the Maya, the people who came and invaded, they were trying to keep the people suppressed and instilling themselves into the Mayas. And it's all about control. I think that's the connection. It's all about the people in power trying to keep control of the people below them.
Thank you, thank you. Go ahead. I'm interested in hearing from other people as well. Those are excellent ideas, definitely. Anybody else?
I guess I'll keep going. I'd like to add more to that.
All right, sure.
Yeah, I guess the struggle of being represented in Antonio Soberani's case, the people who were leading the labor movement, they were unequipped, and Soberanis took pity on them. Was like, I'll step up on your behalf, and he acknowledged that he wasn't really fit for it, but he still managed to stand up for them. But yet he wasn't acknowledged at all by the higher ups, or at least for the most part, because of his low education, his income, his background, his social class. Again, with the Mayas, it was people who were not knowledgeable, who had a lot of education, power, money, and I guess the Mayas couldn't really represent themselves. They just acknowledged their presence and did their best. But the interesting thing is, they didn't sit by and just take the things from the people, from the invaders, we could say. They always kept fighting, and yeah, again, in Soberani's case, the labor movement, they did not rest easy. They didn't just take it all. They fought for what they thought was right, and yeah, eventually made some changes.
All right, well, thank you for those two comments. One of them, talking, I think it was Doris, who spoke about how they were both fighting against oppression or suppression, right? Fighting for their rights. And I think Jason mentioned the point of fighting against exploitation. I noticed that all of you choose stories about resistance, about fighting back, right? That's fantastic. I think what's important in all of these stories is to, yes, that there's a fight against exploitation. And if one is going to fight back, you're very interested in fighting back, obviously, choosing the stories. I think it's very important to understand how power operates, right? And what was going on there, okay? What was going on there? In a sense, you can see the connection with colonialism. The thing about colonialism is not a historical past, right? Colonialism, actually, people talk a lot more. There's a group of people talk about coloniality, which is, coloniality is the other face of modernity. Coloniality is a way of thinking, a logic. Two things. One of them is racism, right? Some people are considered to be more important because of their race. That was present at the historical colonialism, and it's present today. But not only people, but their knowledge, their way of doing, being, and doing in the world, right? So that's one. And the next one is obviously the capital exploitation. All right, so that's fantastic. That's a good connection that you made there. Now, I'm going to make maybe more of a question. Maybe I'll make a comment and invite your feedback, right? and this is around COVID. So a lot of people are saying, talking about a post-COVID kind of moment. Yeah, COVID's a moment of reflection. It really forces us to go inside and think about, and we cannot go back to the same thing and all of that. And people are doing their gardens, and I'm going to change. I'm going to throw this at you. I'm going to argue that actually nothing will change. I'm going to say, I don't think that anything will change. I feel like people are going to start their gardens. Once things clear, unless COVID goes for a long time, once things start going on, they'll forget their gardens and go back to buying food from the market and all of that, right? And yes, you know what, I appreciate my family more, but once COVID kind of kicks in, post-COVID kicks in, and I'm able to travel, forget about my family. So I wonder to what extent we're going to actually transcend. What do you think?
I partially agree with you. I think in the lifestyle and maybe the social distancing and maybe hygiene will change. Maybe people who didn't wash their hands before will start washing them finally. But relationship wise, and like you said, the garden and all these things, people will eventually go back to their normal lives, and everything that they thought that they started doing will slowly start to fade away. One day they'll forget to water the plants and they'll start dying off and all of that. But yeah, I totally agree with that part that you said. Or the other part, people might notice how much they actually liked being at home, and this will probably have various effects on different people. Some people might notice that, this job that I had, I hated it so much. So I am in for a change, and I do prefer keeping my garden and maybe doing some subsistence farming or something. But I think that's why I said partially agree with your view, because in some people it will have an effect, but in others as things go back to normal, they'll just go back to their normal everyday lives before COVID.
I want to hear from other people. Thank you for that. I'm just being a devil's advocate and throwing it out there. It's nice to think things will change, but let's think about serious. And I guess the important question is really what could we possibly do to bring about change? Right? Because I think it can be a romantic idea. This is fantastic. I'm afraid that maybe it might be a missed opportunity. It's kind of what I'm throwing out there. Jump in.
Sure. No. I think, oh man, so Baranis is so relatable. That's what I'm gonna say. Again, his movement seemed futile, but no, it did start. It instilled something in the people, made them tingly, made them want change. Germany, China, pollution dipped. Pollution really dipped, and I was reading the coronavirus. It was something like that, something like SCMP. It was some news, and it said that people finally had blue skies. I don't know, if I was lacking blue skies for a while, and saw it, I guess that would instill in the people the desire to have more of it. And it's like, oh yeah, this is actually possible. We can reduce pollution. And again, Germany hit their goal too. I don't remember how much it was, but they also hit it. And if that doesn't really show people the change, I don't know what will. And it's like planting a little seed. It grows and it shows the people what they're missing out. Yeah.
I think that I actually agree to some extent with what Mr. Penada said, because we are only human. We are carried out by pleasures almost every day, and so we will not want to keep this quarantine lifestyle or the habits we acquired during this quarantine lifestyle like forever. Only the ones we actually agreed with and we um build it upon, but not all of them, because at some we were so into our normal life. It is just something that was a part of us already. So not following that after everything is free will be very hard for us, because that's what we want for right now. That's what we are looking forward for right now. Like, when will things go back to normal? And like Doris said, there will be people will also find ways in they will um they will try to normalize it as much as possible and do every single thing to to go back to normal and to make it seem like if nothing happened. And this pandemic was a, a very historic event in in the history of the world. It I think everyone will remember this. I mean, we were in quarantine for almost 3 months now, and so what we want to this point is just to get out, to go back to normal, to have what we had before and we don't have right now. And maybe indeed we will still follow it with the habits we acquired during this time, but not all of them, because to some point they do not benefit us that much than what we had in our normal life. It's that, if that's what we can call it.
Okay.
May I just throw in something here?
Sure.
At the beginning, Jason, you said what you had. What was it with the lampara?
Mm.
And I said, yeah, we and at least three of us in tonight's session at some point in time did not have the type of lighting that you have today. We studied with the lampara, we studied with the bombillo, and the quinqué. And when I look at it, yeah, there are certain things that we keep doing given the scenario that has come up from COVID. And it may be difficult for, especially you, the younger generation, um, to not go without what we have had. And personally, the technology is one thing I would not want to give up. I don't mind staying in a state of quarantine. I don't mind it, because in this day and age, we are able to, yes, work from home, those of us who can. But remember that there are other people out there whose only ways, whose only means of putting food on the table is to go out. And so that's one of the other things. And then again, you mentioned about washing the hands consistently. I think that is one of the things that must be credited to us as Belizeans. I remember our elders and my grandmother in particular taught us at home that there were among the things that you had to do. You had to learn how to give thanks, to be grateful. Again, we come back to the Popol Vuh. Never go to sleep angry. Never go to sleep hungry. And what was it? Oh, and never go to sleep without at least having cleaned your body. And then there's the proverb, no? Cleanliness is next to godliness. I think we had forgotten some of those values. And if COVID has taught some of that, has retaught us some of that. And for you, the younger generation, it simply reiterates what our elders have told us. So again, in terms of the historical narrative, where what has happened in the past has come back to tell us what is going on. We have to be very grateful that it is not like in 1918, as our elders would tell us, that as the church bell is, as people are being buried, the church bell is ringing that someone else has passed away during that Spanish flu of 1918, 1920. But we do have to be aware that second wave may, and we hope not, but who knows, you know.
Maybe just some final thoughts, Mr. David. From me, I won't ask another question, but I was thinking that, in a sense, one of the reasons why there might not be any, the change might be not as much maybe as we expect. I mean, you're right. There might be some cultural changes. You might wash your hands more. Certainly, you might be scared of strangers. Okay, that seems to be might be increased xenophobia. You know, they're from Guatemala. There's COVID there. You know, let me stay away from them. So it might increase them. There might be some negative effects as well. But you know, they say something that there's not often people talk about a natural disaster. Like COVID could be a natural disaster, you know, but there's a theory that says really there's no such thing as a natural disaster, right? Disasters are not natural. Yes, there's a virus. Yes, it's a hurricane. Yes, there's an earthquake. But the disaster in terms of like human life and suffering is not natural as such, but rather they are socio-natural. In other words, who are the people who are going hungry and who have to receive assistance? Okay, who are they? Is that natural? So maybe not. And so what I'm getting at is that, in a sense, there is an economic system, right, that it produces that. So in a sense, if we go back to saying, all right, we're going to go back to our jobs, yes, we're going to go back to self-tourism, yes, we're going to do all of that, which is creating those inequalities, then yes, we might have wash our hands more, but perhaps in terms of the more important questions of society, right? Who knows, right? Whether that will happen. And somebody said about climate change, right? Climate change, the world hasn't come, right, together to fight climate change, right? And it'd be interesting to see if it does happen. Maybe if the COVID-19 goes for longer, right? When it will really force you to say, you know what, forget the job. You know what, let's actually join as a community and let's start planting gardens communally. Let's help each other to do work. Let's do that. Right now, you know, yeah, I'm kind of waiting. Maybe things will be okay, and I'm going to go back to my job, and things will continue as normal. And I think there are two readings that that you were given. One of them is by a priest. I forget, Mr. David knows the name. Who talks about, you know, going back to the recession is the thing that the recession into what we had before, right, is probably the greatest thing that we have to fear, because things were not good then. And what COVID has done is simply shine a light on what the things that are wrong, right? And so I guess it will take a lot more, right, than say, well, you know, yeah, happy. I think possibility for change is there, but we have to grasp it. And I think those two readings, the one by, I forget this, Dr. Avila, you know, a little bit of that, although he still emphasizes a lot of like trade and all of those sort of things, kind of a little bit back of the same, right? But I think what the Pope Francis and Father, I forget his name, you know, he's really asking us to think radically about change, right? So anyway, those are my final thoughts, Mr. David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philly, Mr. Giovanni. Any final word from the panelists? Certainly, we've heard a lot, and we would like to hear some final words from somebody on the thoughts that have been aired this evening. While you think about that, certainly what Filiberto and Mr. Giovanni have pointed to, keys is transformation, and that is what Father Cantalamessa said in his homily on Holy Thursday. A recession would be to go back after this, having gone through the COVID crisis, going back to sameness, to how we were, no? So as we all know, crisis is opportunity, and opportunity to change, to grow, to mature. So it's something that you as Belizeans, the new generation of leaders, should think about. How can we change now? What is our new vision? What is the new cause? How can we champion that cause to create the new man and the new woman for Belize? No, the fifth creation of man, following that sequence in the Popol Vuh. So final words from anyone.
I would just want to say to everyone present and to everyone who might hear this, this is a critical moment in history, and I think we should be very open-hearted and very open-minded to everything that can happen and will happen. We should assess everything we can and look where we can provide and where we can help as much as we can, not only for ourselves but for our neighbor. Belize is a very small country, and there needs to be lots of development. We can see that in many aspects we're running on luck, and that's something that we should change and we should open our minds to, because we don't want to go through this again in any point in history again, and or in future times, and just run on luck again. If not, we want to have, or we should have, a very stable place and solid um, concrete way in which we should go through, because it took a really um, hard time and a toll on the entire country to be in this way. So it should be a call for change for everyone, from starting from the children to the youth to the adults, and we should start when it comes to, I mean, empowering everyone to open their minds, because it's something that we need. Maybe it won't be in the blink of an eye, or it won't happen from one day to the other, but there, like Antonio Soberan is, we should take a step forward. We should start. It might take a long time, but we will surely appreciate when it comes to, if it ever happens again in history, it will be up to our children, so we can build that path a little bit more. And that's something that we need to keep in mind, because sometimes we can be very selfish and look only for ourselves and say, well, if we if we go through it right now, and if we get over it right now, well, then we'll be fine later, and not just um just stay there and leave it like that. If not, we should continue the change. We should um, empower a change, whether it be a little or big. But there should be open-mindedness in everyone, no bias, and it should be not of one but of all Belizean citizens.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. You mentioned something very important. Elizabeth said, we operated on luck. That's a very interesting thing. I would like to say, I don't want to prolong this, but there was a there is a write-up about, it appeared in some Canadian magazine, about how Belize combated the first wave of COVID. And I mean, it presented a first world scenario that Belize made use of technology, and was able to use the statistical unit to be able to track and to monitor those who were infected, and made use of this technology that was one of its kind in Central America, apparently the only country, the first country to do so. So it presented a very nice scenario, no? But we know that our population, the number of people, our low population, our geographical distribution, all of that aided, and above all, divine providence. People prayed a lot, no? Um, so it's that scenario, no, of how prepared were we indeed, and if a second wave were to hit us, as Mr. Giovanni said, will we be more prepared? Unlike, I mean, we heard from Guatemala yesterday that one of their hospitals has collapsed already, no? Can't take any more of the sick. So let's hear, Andre, what do you have to say as last words?
The only thing I would have to say would be something that Doris said in the beginning of this. She said that we should be people of action, and I would have to agree with her. The easiest thing to do is complain, and that's easy because it's fun, and we basically just say what we want to say and then do nothing. And most of us have complained about something, either be it classes, the curfew, the quarantine. We always complain, and instead of complaining, I say we should be people of action. We can go to by far one of the most popular pages on for Belizeans, which is Belize Buy and Sell, and that thing is full of complaints and people not doing anything about it. So my last words would be, instead of complaining, let us join together and do something about things that we do not think are adequate or
Okay, thank you.
There.
things that we still
Just,
Sorry.
need,
just before somebody else says the last word, let me just put
or
this in.
things that we still are in
Um,
need of.
the, if I may, we've been talking about, in the COVID scenario, there's been social distancing. The reality is that what we need to practice, uh, albeit with the fears, as Dr. Penados mentioned, is the physical distancing is here to stay. But we must remember to at least show some level of social solidarity. We've had that physical distancing, but let it be with social solidarity.
Mhm. That's it. That's a very good point, Mr. Giovanni. There was somebody who mentioned that one of our achievements or accomplishments is that we made it through, no? I mean, we might have a second wave, it's likely, but one positive on our end is that we were united to a certain degree and we made it through. Who said that? Was it Elizabeth? Somebody said it, but that's a plus on our end, no? However much luck was on our side, it's a plus on our end. Jason,
There and sorry. Okay.
you had something to say?
And you saying that unity. So patriotism is something that played a huge role
Mhm.
during this entire time. At the very start of the pandemic, or as the pandemic was making its way through the Americas, there were many of our own people who said that they would rather live in other countries like El Salvador or Guatemala just because the way their government ran the the measures. I'm not sure if it was a week ago or a few weeks back, and as the experts that they air on television, Dr. Manzanero said that now we have other countries asking us for help. How did we combat the coronavirus? And that's something that we need to open our minds to, because we need to be a little bit more patriotic to some extent.
Mhm.
We need to show that unity as Belizeans, and that's something we lack a lot. And I'm glad I'm seeing it right now, because it is it is something that has to make its way to our hearts, because we need to be very very patriotic. We need to take a little bit of pride in saying we're Belizeans, we are unified, and we can combat everything we can.
Very good point, Elizabeth. Jason, Jason,
I don't know. I really don't have much to add, but I really enjoy the point Andre brought up of, yeah, being people of action. And even if we're not, I guess bringing up the complaint is the first step for acknowledging. We have to acknowledge that there's a problem, and I guess that's the first step. The next step is actually doing something about it.
right. Thank you, Jason. Being proactive as citizens. Doris, final words?
Well, I I think at this point, almost everything has been said, but yeah, I'd just like to mention again that we, as people, we were able to see that we can join together and make things happen, like with the food relief aid, and that we need to keep that going. Just like I said previously, we need to be people of action, and Andrea mentioned it again. So that would be one important aspect that we can learn from all of the situation that we've gone through.
Okay, thank you very much, Doris. Diana, what do you have to tell us?
I would say what Elizabeth said about the patriotism, I think it's not about the government, I think it's about the people. Because Bel- well, our Belizeans, they were afraid because they were aware of this, how Belize stands, that it does not have the capacity to hold such a virus. Like Guatemala, like people got comfortable on knowing that they could stand the virus, but they don't they didn't really comply with the rules. At first they did, but you can see that they're getting desperate, and they have a good government system. Even their own president, who is a doctor, has given good measures, but it's the people who are going against him. And that's something we don't see here in Belize. They may complain, but we are taking action by staying and doing our part, staying home and following the rules and washing our hands. And if people are breaking it, it's not the majority, it's like the least amount of people.
Very good, Diana. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Mr. Elton Cab.
Um, I like to applaud everyone for their point of views and all that they've said. Also, yeah, what I've realized is how Belize um, is putting much efforts, as in the people, to fight against this pandemic. And so far, we are doing a good job, especially frontline workers and essential workers who risk their lives to keep us in a steady and safe environment. And I just want to thank everyone who have been doing on their parts to help one another and not let this virus continue for much long. I also have acknowledged our community, as in how we have aided one another through this pandemic, and how the jobs that have been essential, we do it, and we can do it at home. And the technologies nowadays is what have helped us to keep on going. And yes, as I've seen, it's been a very interesting journey to be experiencing this as youths, but it's something that we should and can learn from, and keep going on forward as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elton. And to wrap up the session and bring it to an end, I would wish to thank every one of you for your excellent job participation in the preparation of your papers and in engaging in discussion. Eh, I wish to thank Filiberto and Giovanni for having assisted in this first forum. Let us remember as we come to the end that just like in the Popol Vuh and in the histories of so many nations, they have given the proper role to the presence of God journeying in the story. And this is what Sister Barbara Flores tells us in our journey to introspection and soul searching. We must regard God as the companion in our journey. And he has been carrying us through, and he will carry us through this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis. And we should emerge as a stronger nation, more nationalistic, more hardworking, more focused. That's the ideal, right? That's remember, we have two scenarios here: the utopia, and reality. And the ideal, as the romantic vision, as Dr. Penado said, might sometimes be that too romantic, too utopic. We should still aim at utopia. It's like when you throw something you want to reach ahead, you aim higher so that at least you reach closer to your target. No, that's lady reality. I'm thinking of the terms as this South American writer, Filiberto, he's passed on. He spoke about lady utopia and lady reality. ¿Cómo se llamaba? Este escritor.
No, I'm not sure.
I forgot his name. But anyway, that's his concept, no? But thank you very much, and all the best to you. Remember, for 2 years, we tried to mold you to become leaders. And so as you move on, you move out, you exercise those qualities of being good leaders in your own right, wherever you end up in the field of studies, higher studies, or work. And as you lead on, you transform Belize, because Belize needs every single one of you. So have a good night, all the best, and our very, very last words to Justin Vera.
Okay. Good night, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone in the forum for participating. And I'd like to thank Mr. David for the opportunity to address you as the last person to speak in this. This is probably the last time we'll see these group of students together in this way. It has been a pleasure working with all of you, and I'd like to say thank you.
Good night.